Hi everyone, today we're going to be having a look at the lungs. We're going to look at the structure and what each part does, gas exchange, how the heart and lungs work to supply oxygen and glucose to cells. So grab yourself a paper and a pen and follow along with me. Now your lungs are made up of lots of different structures. I'm going to be drawing them using a number of different colours. Again, you don't have to, but I would just make sure that you get your diagram labelled with what the structure's called and what their functions are. So, the first structure you need to know is called the trachea. Now your trachea is just the tube, the pipe that brings the air that you're breathing in to your lungs and the air that you're breathing out to your mouth and into the atmosphere. You can see on my diagram, the trachea has these lines. Now those are rings of cartilage and you can actually feel them on your own neck. So if you look up and you run your finger up and down, you should feel little bumps. Now those bumps are those rings of cartilage and they're there to make sure that your airway stays open so you can breathe even when you put your head in all sorts of strange positions. Now cartilage is still the same stuff that your ears are made out of on the very tip of your nose. So that is pretty flexible, but it's also quite stiff, so it will keep that airway open. The next part of our lungs are the bronchi. Now they are two smaller tubes that split off into each lung, and again they have lines of cartilage that help support these tubes and keep them open. The next part is the bronchioles. So they are, again, bronchi, think of branch. They are smaller branches that deliver air throughout your lung. These also have small rings of cartilage to again keep them open. Now this doesn't really look like a pair of lungs at the moment, so the next stage we're going to draw on is the lungs themselves. I'm just going to draw it on one side on my diagram just to save some space, but remember both sides have these large lung structures which is just made up of lots of these bronchioles and the next part we're going to look at called alveoli or air sacs. At the end of each of the bronchioles and throughout the whole of the lung are very tiny microscopic pockets of air called air sacs or alveoli. Now these would be throughout the lung, but I'm not going to draw them all because I'll be, even greyer by the time I'm done. But what we can do to sort of look at the alveoli in a bit more detail, this is just imagine we're zooming in. If you look at the diagram, this blue part is the alveoli itself, or alveolus if you're just talking about one. The red parts on my diagram show blood vessels. Now the lungs have a very, very rich blood supply. That's when if you see a pair of lungs, in a picture, they're often very dark pink. The blood vessels crisscross the outside of these air sacs. They kind of look like a little bunch of grapes, and they will lie very, very, very close. And because these are so small, the walls of each alveolus is made up of one cell only to really maximise the oxygen and carbon dioxide moving in and out. But we're going to look at this in a bit more detail a bit later on in the video. We're going to look at the alveoli in a little bit more detail now because examiners love to link this with the topic from the beginning of the year on diffusion, looking at gas exchange. So this structure here is the alveolus. Alveoli have lots of different adaptations, so structures that make them very, very good at their job. Now their job is to get rid of as much oxygen into the blood and get as much carbon dioxide in from the blood for gas exchange. We're going to start by talking about the pathway of oxygen. So oxygen will be in a very high concentration inside the air that you're breathing in. So when you breathe in, what's happening is the oxygen within that air, remember we're breathing in air, is going to be drawn into the lungs by negative pressure, and we'll look at that in a moment, until it fills up the alveolus. So you have, again, a high oxygen concentration. What's going to happen then is via diffusion, the oxygen is going to move through these very thin walls and into the blood and be taken away. The reason why it moves is there's always a higher concentration here compared to in the blood. But again, we'll talk about that in just a sec. So let's break down this journey a little bit more. So you have oxygen in high concentration in the air. What happens is when you breathe in, or as we're going to call it poshly, inhale, what's going to happen then is the oxygen is going to come into the alveolus. You're going to have a high concentration of O2, and because this is a high concentration, it's going to diffuse through these walls and into the blood. Now, in terms of adaptations, you have very, very thin walls here and here. So I'll do it in a different colour. So you've got thin walls. That makes diffusion happen much more rapidly and easily. Another very clever thing about having your blood vessels so close is because this blood is immediately whisking away that oxygen, it's always going to ensure that there is less oxygen in the blood compared to your alveoli, so oxygen is always moving in, kind of like a constant flowing stream, like a waterfall. The opposite, this will happen for carbon dioxide. So you'll have a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. And because the blood is always bringing in new carbon dioxide, it's going to maintain a high concentration. So the carbon dioxide will diffuse into the alveoli, and when you breathe out, or as we call it, exhale, that will take the carbon dioxide out into the atmosphere, remove it, maintaining that concentration gradient. Last thing we're going to look at for today is how the heart and lungs work together, and I like to call them your body's BFF, but they're not BFFL because it's your life that they're controlling. So what we're going to do is we're going to, on a little bit of paper or wherever you're taking your notes, start by drawing your heart and your lungs. Now your heart and your lungs in reality lie together. Your heart actually has a little space nestled where your lungs are. This again is really efficient for exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide because the two parts of your body that are responsible for those are right next door. So that's again why they're BFF, they're like funky roommates. Your heart and lungs are supplying oxygen and glucose to every cell in your body that requires respiration, which is all of them. Your body cells need the supply of oxygen and glucose so they can carry out respiration and release that energy for all of the processes that are keeping you alive right now. As we looked at in my heart video, we should know by now that humans as mammals have what we call a double circulatory system. So you have one loop that goes from the heart to the lungs, and you have one loop that's going from the heart to the body. So we're going to draw those with two separate lines. As you may remember from another video that we did on the heart, the blood vessels that are bringing things in and out of the heart should be, hopefully if you've been doing revision, be in your brain somewhere. So the blood vessel that's bringing blood to the heart from the lungs, remember lungs is pulmonary and veins bring blood to the heart, so this is going to be our pulmonary vein. And again, this one we're going to the lungs, so it's pulmonary, and it's the arteries that take blood away from the heart, so this one's going to be our pulmonary artery. If we look a bit further down, now these are a bit more complicated. Not every single blood vessel that is going from your body to your heart and from your heart to your body are called the two ones that are attached to the heart, but these are we're thinking just of the blood vessels bringing the blood immediately into the heart from the body and immediately taking the blood out of the body to out of the heart to the body. So again, veins bring blood in. There is no special name for body, so veins and vena cava. And then on the other side, we've got the largest blood vessel. We could draw a thicker arrow to show that that's the largest, if you wish. This is going to be our aorta. Now, in terms of how these work together, remember the jobs of the heart and the lungs together is to supply your cells with the oxygen and glucose that they need for respiration and to get rid of carbon dioxide and other wastes that need to be disposed of before they damage cells. So if we start from thinking about what's happening in the alveoli, you have oxygen-rich air entering the lungs when we inhale. This air is going to be put into the alveoli, then it's going to be passed from the alveoli into the blood. That oxygen-rich blood we know is called oxygenated, high in oxygen. That oxygenated blood will go from your lungs into your heart, through the chambers, so through the right atrium into the right ventricle, then down into the aorta, and that will take it off and into the body. Along the way, that blood is going to be making a stop at your small intestine. And this is where any glucose in the food that you eat is going to get deposited into the blood. So by the time the blood reaches the cells in the body, it will be high in oxygen and high in glucose. The body cells will say thank you very much and use that for energy release, and the respiration equation we can put in here to just jog our memories. So that oxygen that's come from the lungs and the glucose that's come from your intestines and your digestive system are going to react to synthesize, put together water, carbon dioxide, and it will release energy. So this is an exothermic reaction. Exothermic, remember, exo, exit, letting out energy. Right, this is getting a bit complicated, so before I talk through what happens with carbon dioxide, I'm just going to neaten things up a bit. Okay, looking at what happens after respiration has occurred then, we've got carbon dioxide and water being produced. So the cells in your body are working very hard to release energy, to keep you warm, to allow you to move, muscle contractions, to allow you to build protein to become swole. But all of that creates waste products, stuff that your body doesn't want. So we've got carbon dioxide and we've got water. Now, any water that's made does get used in your cells, or if it's excess water, so water we don't need, it's going to be taken to the kidneys and removed in your urine. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, has to come out through our breathing. So you'll have cells that are high in carbon dioxide, and what will happen is that carbon dioxide will again diffuse into the blood because there is a lower concentration in the blood. That carbon dioxide will travel through the vena cava into the heart, then through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. When we get inside the lungs, CO2 will move into the alveoli. Again, it will diffuse. And then when we breathe out, or if we're being posh, exhale, you breathe out air that contains high carbon dioxide. Don't make the mistake of saying that we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide either, ladies and gents, because you are still breathing in air. It's a mixture of different gases, so there's some nitrogen in there, some hydrogen in there, but there's also oxygen and carbon dioxide. When you breathe in, you're breathing in air, but it's higher in oxygen compared to carbon dioxide. And when you're breathing out, you're still breathing out air, but it is higher in carbon dioxide compared to oxygen. You also get some water vapor coming out in your breath as well. That's why when you breathe on a mirror, you often get the steam forming, which is just your vaporized breath. That's all for today. What I'm going to do is just have a Google Doc linked in the description. Just fill that in on Google Classroom for me and make sure that you do your best effort. Go through the video again if you need to, look at your notes, and I will see you next time.